Well, thank you, General. To that, there are several things that I would add. In 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court took up the issue of voter ID laws. And in Crawford v. Marion County Election Board, they upheld Indiana's voter ID law. Now, that decision was not some neat ideological split between the judicial right and left. It was conservative justices plus moderate Justice Anthony Kennedy plus liberal Justice John Paul Stevens. And among other things, the court noted that despite the plaintiff's allegations, they could not produce a single voter who claimed that they had any difficulty whatsoever in casting their ballot. Now, that has become something of the baseline that all the states have looked at as they've gone forward. Therefore, in order to try and block voter ID laws, the Justice Department has had to resort to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which covers certain southern jurisdictions where there was a history of racial tension involving voting rights. Now, in 1966, when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Section 5 in South Carolina v. Katzenbach, even that year, the liberal Warren Court, perhaps the most liberal years of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1966, said that this was an extraordinary measure that was only justified because in the 1960s there was such a clear record of racial issues involved in voting. The court noted even at the time, though, that if, as a society, America progressed, where racism was no longer a dominant force in certain parts of the country, that Section 5 would exceed the limits of Congress's power under the 15th Amendment. And in fact, there are two cases underway right now raising exactly that issue. Shelby County v. Holder before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. And now, after having its law blocked, Texas has also brought, in defense of its voter ID law, a question to the courts regarding the constitutionality of Section 5. That may well be resolved in the next year, and should Section 5 be struck down by the court, be invalidated, then there would be no even colorable assertion of federal power that the federal government could raise to block these. And indeed, it's worth noting that voting is a fundamental right, but it carries with it the corollary right not to have your legitimate vote canceled out or diluted by someone else's fraud or corruption. Stated in one sentence, it is that every American citizen who is an eligible voter has the right to a fully counted, fully tabulated vote that could impact our election. Also, voting is perhaps unique among our fundamental rights in that it is the only constitutional fundamental right that is also a duty, the duty of citizens. And as a result, there are certain reasonable steps that each of us participates in that we don't have to regarding other rights. None of us has to register to speak. We don't have to register to go to church, to attend a public rally. But you do have to go through a voter registration process before you can cast a ballot. You have to show up at certain times of a certain day in order to cast a vote. And in that regard, it's similar to marriage. Marriage, too, has been recognized by a century as a fundamental right, yet a person cannot simply walk into a county registrar, give a name, and have them issue a marriage certificate in that name. They'll require you to show some proof of identification before they sign you over a governmental document with long-lasting legal and societal consequences. So too, casting a vote in an election is an action we participate in with long-lasting legal and societal consequences. Now, you don't find any protests going on regarding having to show voter ID before you can get a marriage license. And there's no difference regarding the right to vote, especially with laws as was upheld by the Supreme Court in 2008, where the state of Indiana and these other states now are saying if for some reason you do not have a driver's license or some other form of picture ID, just go through the process and the state will provide you one for free to make sure that on election day you can cast your vote, that it will be counted, and that it will not be diluted by anyone else's illegitimate actions. Thank you.